how are we today? Welcome back into the greenhouse. If we haven't met already, I am Sam. I'm your plant collector in Melbourne. And I know it's been a hot minute. It's been a whole month since I've uploaded my last video on MAB. And I thought to myself, there are so many people wanting to know the update. So it's been about 4 weeks since I last did that video with Scotty. Let me tell you, we've got some good, we've got some bad, and we've got some things in between. I just thought that I would jump on camera and show you the results in terms of 1 month and what has happened to the plants. I'll give you the pros and cons that I see fit, as well as my experience so far with MAB. So without further ado, let's look at the plants. I did 6 different plants. Some of them were anthurium, some of them were philodendron, and some even had root rot. So how are they going? So I'm going to show you the best result that has come up from the 7 plants, and it is so this is my Syngonium milk confetti, and as you can see there, oh my lord, I was here in the greenhouse just yesterday and I'm looking at this new leaf and it is huge. Do you see that? Like, that is the tip of the leaf just there. Oh my lord. That is going to be a freaking huge leaf. This plant has done the best in MAB. So for Syngonium, even though I've only got 1 Syngonium, so it's not really great in terms of an experiment to compare, but what I'll show you is the amazing roots that it has. That is what has happened in just a month. So here we have, I'll just keep rotating, but I'm sure you can see just there, not only do we have lots and lots of primary healthy roots, we've actually got some secondary ones coming out as well. So this one has done so well in MAB, and I've gotten 2 new leaves, and that 3rd leaf right there is going to be enormous. So this plant is really truly loving it in MAB, and it's probably the best result this far. So keep in mind that this plant, when I ended up taking it out of the sphagnum moss, I actually got rid of a lot of the secondary tertiary roots, so all of the finer ones. Really and truly, this plant has bounced back from the transfer, and I'm blown away, honestly, when I look at this plant and how well it's doing. I will definitely have to try more Syngoniums in MAB, but it is fair to say that this Syngonium, this milk confetti, has really and truly enjoyed it. It has flourished like I have never seen. Now you can see that it is well and truly grown all around it. It's doing so well. I'll show you kind of like the mediocre things that have kind of just not done much. The ones that experience root rot. So these plants, I'm telling you, I had all intentions of them not making it. So they had rot. I was like, oh, look, these are probably on the way out, but I'll just chuck it in MAB and see how it goes. And they have surprisingly held up and stabilized, which is such a treat to me. I'm so glad that I managed to transfer these into MAB before it was too late. This one here, though, it had a little bit of root rot. I already had overwatered it quite a bit. So there was like 3 leaves initially, and then the last leaf was definitely overwatered, so it was on the way out anyway. But this one hasn't done too much, even when I look at the roots. So this one was just slightly getting rot, but now it has stopped rotting and it looks like it is just still getting used to MAB. So this one is kind of like happy in the media, but also hasn't given me crazy results. So yeah, that's plant number 2. This one I am so happy with. This one was severely root rotted. So this one I was actually really scared, and it was on the decline super duper fast. But as you can see here, we've got like some symptoms of dehydration, and that's purely because this plant doesn't have any roots to absorb the water anyway. But this one is still looking quite all right. Like, I mean, it looks like a shit leaf, but it was shit to begin with. This is the one that had rot, and now it is stabilizing. I probably do have to chop off that leaf, but regardless, it is not dead. So that's a win in my book. Next is this beautiful thing right here. This is one of my favorite crystallinums, and this one had slightly, this was slightly rotting, and it also experienced a little bit of a infection, like I'm not sure if it's bacterial or whatever, but it wasn't hot. It's not doing too good. I've sprayed it, so it has stabilized, and I can definitely see new growth, or the plant has really taken into MAB really well. Hopefully you can see some really awesome roots. Keeping in mind, this has only been 4 weeks. And on top of that, this is what blows my mind. So this plant hasn't done anything for 6 months. And even during growing season, because it was struggling so much. But we do have a new growth. Yay! So that's a win, again, in my books. Very much a win. This one definitely wasn't going to die off, but it was just struggling. Like, it hadn't done anything in ages. So I, again, count this as a win. Another win, if you will. To be honest, there is only, I feel like a lot of them are wins besides one. One of them hasn't really done anything, but everything else has definitely been a win. This is my Luxuriance crystallinum, which has definitely seen better days. It has a new leaf. I'm so happy. MAB has saved this guy. And in terms of the roots, I'm finding the anthuriums have really been a lot slower in terms of like getting used to the media, as well as like growing its roots. But I have a feeling that anthuriums in general just tend to grow so much slower, so that's probably the reason. We have a little bit of new roots. Let me just find it. Like right here and right here. So they're quite small and fluffy. So they definitely weren't there when I first repotted it. So it's definitely growing roots, and yeah, it is so happy that it's gotten a new leaf. MAB is saving my plants, that's for sure. I have this Jose Bueno, and I'm going to be honest, when I took it out of its sphagnum, I did get rid of a lot of roots. So it has kind of just like chilled out a bit. Oh, I can see a little bit of new growth, like a little bump just there. But in terms of like, I'm just surprised that this thing didn't lose leaves, because I really did hack at it when I was getting it out of sphagnum. But it looks like it's pretty stable, even though it lost a lot of the roots. So I'm still very happy. I can't see any new roots just yet, but it honestly didn't really have that many to begin with. So I have a feeling it's probably rooting in there, but I just don't want to take it out of MAB. I'm happy just for it to just do its thing in there. But it looks like it is pretty happy in MAB. And last but not least, my Syngonium Silver Blush Doriaki. I think this is a Doriaki after speaking to a lot of my mates about it. So this Anthurium Doriaki, honestly, it suffers from thrips all the time, and it just grows so insanely slow. For all of you that have a Doriaki, I'm sure that you experience the same, that it feels like it does nothing for so many months. In terms of the root growth, I am seeing a little bit like just there. So those little fluffy roots just there. So it is definitely working and doing its thing. And the only reason why I can confirm that is a new growth point. Yes! There has been a little tiny growth point for, I'm gonna say, over 12 months. There was this tiny little growth point that would just never do anything. And then as soon as I moved it into MAB, and a month later, bam, growth point. Even if you don't take my word for it, you can see that the results and the roots and the new growth speak for itself. Now, let's break it down for you. I'm going to tell you my exact thoughts, positives and the negatives, if you will. Keep in mind that I did not use any fertilizer. I didn't put any external things, even though I know that a lot of people that are using MAB are still using other things on top of it. I just thought that it would be a better indication of just doing it without anything on top of. Like in an experiment, we want to control. Maybe I'll do another experiment that's a bit more thorough and sciencey in the future. But regardless, the main point I want to put out there is that I have not used any additional things like fertilizing, nutrients, root roids, anything like that. It is purely just MAB and water. Let's cut to the chase. Overall, I am so pleased with MAB that even in the first month I'm seeing such great results, and I'm going to be moving quite a lot of my plants into MAB. But saying this, I personally only really want to move all the smaller plants into MAB, and then I also just want to experiment later on with like a bigger plant. Putting it in the context of hydro, when you're transferring a plant into hydro, it is better if it is a cutting or a plant that has not really had any soil root, particularly ones that are established and are used to soil, or they're used to a certain condition. I think that putting an older plant into MAB may be some sort of risk. So I think that after this video today, I'll probably put a larger plant into MAB, and then also give you guys an update. And so this video, I'm purely saying that for the smaller plants that are not necessarily super established, that I'm truly loving MAB. Things that I have figured out in the last month, certain things with MAB that I would like to share with you, particularly if you're thinking about transferring plants. I personally love the idea of cleaning off all of the organic matter so that when you put it into MAB, you don't ever have to worry about gnats or rot. So I highly recommend that. Not that you have to, but I do recommend. Additionally, I have only been using MAB as a soil replacement. So lots of people will be wanting to use it as a hydro setup, swapping it out of leca, but for me, I don't use hydroponics active or passive. So I have purely just been putting water in, making sure that we see lots of condensation, that the colors of the stones are really vibrant and dark. As soon as the stones look a little bit more paler and I don't see any condensation, I know that's when I should water. That's how I've been using it. And additionally, if you are going to be using it similarly to me as a replacement for soil, I highly, highly, highly recommend a clear pot, just because you can really see how the roots are going. I normally recommend clear pots in general, but especially for MAB, because you do get to see when you need to water. It's very, very obvious. It's another tip from me to you, if you don't use clear pots, is if you're putting it in something else, even like a nursery pot that's just black and you can't see through it, a good way to figure out whether to water or not is to actually pick it up and try to determine it by weight. People have asked me a lot whether they need like nutrients or root roids straight off the bat of when you first get MAB, put slow release, things like that. Absolutely not. You do not need it, but something to consider maybe like in 6 months time to a year. You definitely do need to be fertilizing or providing nutrients for this plant. I am messaging all over Instagram asking everyone how their experiments are going or how their plants are handling in MAB, and a lot of them are using root roids and fertilizer off the bat. The one thing that I will say is that Scotty has put some organic nutrients in the MAB itself, so it is definitely not needed per se, but it does help tremendously. I've been looking at everyone's photos and videos of the plants in MAB that use it, and my goodness, it just does wonders. Additionally to that, I'm finding that they dry out so much faster than if they were in a soil media, and of course it makes sense because in soil they've got so many components that kind of like retain the water. In terms of these like minerals, it just looks like the water flushes through them and they retain, like perlite, the humidity, but not necessarily like all that water content. Something to definitely consider if you are more of like a low maintenance type of plant parent, that you don't really want to be watering every 3 to 4 days. I'd say that I'm watering every 3 to 4 days with the MAB, but if they were in soil, I definitely would just do maybe about 5 to 6 days. If you are like me and you are an overwaterer and you enjoy watering your plants all the time, then by all means, a MAB is one of the best, because I honestly haven't experienced any over watering, which is fantastic. Something that I also really loved about MAB is that when I transferred all these like soil roots and plants into MAB, normally even if I'm just transferring like a plant into a different pot, like a bigger pot, and I'm disturbing the roots and doing either fresh new media or something different, it normally takes a little bit of a toll, particularly in winter, where I have like leaves dropping off, or where you can tell that the plant is stressed. stressed. The craziest thing is that when I transferred all of these plants to MAB, that they didn't experience any stress whatsoever. I really love the fact that it is so dense and heavy. So I've got a couple of my plants that have grow vertical poles or totem poles or even sphagnum poles. And they normally, if they start to get too long, they're so hard to keep in place. Particularly, I know that there's a problem with leca, that when you start to get really long poles or anything, because it is so light and low density, that the poles and stuff are just, they don't stick. Like they fall everywhere. It's really easy to knock things over because it's just not stabilizing it. I really and truly love the stability that it has because it is so heavy. I've never really experienced gnats in the greenhouse. I used to experience a lot when the plants were more indoors and things were a lot more wet, but because it stays quite warm here in the greenhouse, that I'm not necessarily experiencing any gnats. But I'm sure that if I did have gnats and I moved to this media, that would be one of the biggest pros, because who wants bloody gnats? Doing some of these ones, or one of these ones. If you wish to kind of prolong the watering, Scotty did mention that you can use a tray and put like a very shallow tray of water, so it kind of has a reservoir. The only thing I would say to that is that that water needs to be evaporated or used by the plant quickly, just because if it sits there for too long, so if there's just a bit too much water and the plant's not using it and it kind of just sits there, it's not oxygenated enough. You just don't want the water to sit there for too long. I personally don't do that. I may need to do that if I find that in summer that it's just too much. Another thing that I have very much in my mind is flushing, that if you are fertilizing, putting nutrients or external things to help the plant, that it's probably really important to flush it out as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That is my 2 cents of what I think about MAB. Overall, very good. I do have to say that I'm quite skeptical of the long term and what kind of happens to the plants, but you'll be on this journey with me. I'll keep doing updates and my genuine thoughts on what is going on with MAB. I'm seeing so many people giving it a go, and truly it is awesome to see that there is something different, innovative in the plant community. So by all means, I'm going to try it, review it, and tell you all about it. Thank you for sticking around and hanging out in the greenhouse with me. I'll see you guys in my next video. Until then, stay warm, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys. Mwah!